Welcome to Bridging Generations in Sales and Outreach. I am your host, Butch Nicholson, and we are the podcast where old school wisdom meets new school tools. We're going to do a little something different today. I'm going to be the host and the guest, and the reason why is I've found a lot of good stuff from my last four guests, and I want to share some of the highlights with you. I do want to remind you that you can go back and see any of our shows you want to see. We've had 40-something shows, and they've all been pretty good. And you can see us on LinkedIn, you can see us on Facebook, and you can see us on Instagram. And the channel for all of them is Bridging Generations Through Sales and Outreach. And one thing I wanted to share before I talk about what my guest shared, in the last several months, I started hearing about Jen Jones. And I have no idea who decides what generations are, but there's been a new generation created, and that's Jen Jones. Baby boomers have always been people born from 1945 to 1964. And what whoever they are that creates generations has realized is that younger baby boomers buy a lot more like Gen Xers do than baby boomers do. So baby boomers have been split into two different generations. Baby boomers are now people born from 1945 to 1954, and Jen Jones is 1955 to 1964. Now, I kind of laugh at this because, one, I like that because I was born in 1955, so I'm not a baby boomer anymore. On the other side of it, I'm not sure Jen Jones is really that complimentary. Where the Jones come from is keeping up with the Joneses, and I'll have to admit that I have fallen into that sometimes in my life. I believe we all have, and I'm not sure that that's really something to be proud of, but I'll accept that I'm a Jen Joneser. One of the things that I tell all my guests is we're a show at the end of the day about sales, and one of the things that I know about sales is, from 45 years of experience, is we have to sell the way the buyer wants to buy. We have to meet the buyer where they are, not where we wish they were. I'm going to cheat a little bit today. I usually don't have notes, but to get the best out of four shows, and being my age, my memory's not good enough to remember all this, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. One of the overriding things that I want people to get from our shows is this. We have to meet buyers where they are, not where we wish they were. And we have to sell buyers the way they want to be sold, not the way the way we want to sell them. The other thing that I've learned, and I've learned this in some way or another from every guest, is if we want to make the connections that are valuable to us, we want to make connections with the people that'll buy from us, we've got to do three things. We've got to produce credible content, we've got to be consistent in our content, and that will naturally lead to connections. And I believe where people fall the shortest is in the consistency. And every one of my guests spoke about that. So I'm going to stop talking about me and start sharing with you what our guest had to say. And the first guest I want to talk about is Steve Rising. Steve is a business lawyer in Alpharetta, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta. Steve and Steve's firm have a impeccable reputation around town. And the first thing that Steve said is, and I haven't thought about this, but it's true, first impressions now are made online, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram. That's where first impressions are made now. I mean, it used to be first impressions were made at networking meetings or an introduction from somebody else. Those of you who are old enough to remember the network meetings of the 90s and the 2000s, looking back, that was horrible because that was just a bunch of salespeople trying to sell a bunch of salespeople. But people now, before they talk to you, before they share anything, they want to know who you are. And Steve talked about the real importance of how you show up online. And I hadn't thought about this for a lawyer, and I don't think lawyers would want to really be called salesmen, but they are. And Steve recognizes that. So he says that he gets a lot of information about the other lawyer online, and he can be much better prepared than he was before. And what Steve said reminded me of this. I had a unique legal problem. I was in a meeting with several people that I knew, probably 20, 30 people. And I shared that I had this special problem, and did anybody have a lawyer they would refer? And 4 people gave me names. 3 people gave me the same name, and all 3 of them said, see this person, do what he says, and you'll be good. And when I was thinking about what Steve said about reputation, I thought, you know what? That guy has what every person in sales should want, to be the guy who, if you've got this problem, you need to see. And one thing I tell people, and you can fall into this trap, because there are people that are quote unquote influencers. And this is not about being a influencer. This is about being influential. And one of the things Steve said and kind of wrapped up with that I really liked, he said, if they can't see you, they're not choosing you. So I want to thank Steve for being on the show and his insights. They were very helpful. My next guest is one of the people that I really enjoy having in my life. He is Christian Colleen. And although I'm 70 years old and Christian's 23, we become really good friends. And I believe Christian's learned a lot from me. And I know that I've learned a lot from Christian. Surprisingly, Christian's half the age of my daughter. So Christian shared with me, and I knew a little bit about this, but he grew a massive following on YouTube. He had 120,000 subscribers, and he had over 1.5 million views, and he stopped. And he really didn't know why he stopped. He just stopped. And I think what happens with all of us is, and I know salespeople are guilty of this, I know I've been guilty of it, is we stop too soon. You know, we try something and some period of time goes away and it hadn't worked, so we stop. And I believe, and Christian and I talked about this, is consistency, and I'm going to read this again because Christian said this and I thought it was great. Consistency isn't marketing, it's reputation in motion. And we don't, you know, if you get online, you get on LinkedIn, you get on Facebook, and you just brag about how great you are, that's not what people care about. People want value. People's time is valuable, and it's our job to have a social media face that adds value and makes it worth their time to take a look at us. And Christian made a good point. He said, achieving a result is not the same as sustaining visibility. And again, this goes back to what Steve said. If they can't see you, they can't choose you. And if you're not putting yourself out there, they can't choose you either. So I will just quickly say and give a little plug for Christian. He is back on his YouTube page, and I won't tell you I'm not going to tell you what he does, but I can tell you it's worth looking at. So I want to say thank you to Christian. My next guest was Natalie Corona, and as she says, like the beer. And I've known Natalie for probably a year and a half. And Natalie is a ball of fire. I mean, she is always on the fastest speed there is. She's in the HR space. And Natalie is just one of those people that can light up the room. But being in HR, there's obviously some challenges that HR has that are unlike some of the others that we have. The first thing Natalie said was, you don't lose deals to generations, you use them to misalignment. And one of the things she talked about, and it's certainly worth listening to if you haven't, is a concerted effort with the clients she deals with, to put generations together, to take those, let's just call them baby boomers, Gen Jonesers, together with Gen X, even Gen Z, because they can make a powerful combination. I have to tell this story on myself. So twice in the last few weeks, I've done my show from remote locations. And one with Steve Rising and one with Harrison O'Neill. And on both of them, we had an internet problem connecting from those remote sites, and my 70-year-old self had no idea what we needed to do. But along with Ala Mustafa, who's the producer of my show, and I'll talk about her in a minute, and my guest Harrison and Steve, they were able to get us online from that remote location, and it all worked out well. So that was a perfect example of the younger generation hopping in and taking care of the older generation there. Natalie talked about something that I think is really important, and what she talked about was not stereotyping generations. Just because somebody's young doesn't mean they're great at computer stuff, but they probably are. Just because somebody's old like me Doesn't mean that I'm an old fogey that doesn't know anything. But if you can put together those generations, pull the best from both, you've got a powerful combination. One thing, if you're interested in learning more about how baby boomers and Gen Z differ and need to connect, how Gen Jones and Gen X are different, and how they can work really effective together, go back and listen to the show that I had with Natalie, and there's some great advice there. And I'm not going to talk about that because I'd get myself in trouble, and Natalie does a great job of it. So the next show is a really fun show for me. Ala Mustafa is the producer of my show, and Haven George is the one who produces my content. And I really enjoyed having them as guests. It was a little different having people you work with every day. Both of them are Gen Z, I would guess. And they really had some great insight. And one of the things that we talked about, or they talked about, was the first few even seconds determines your engagement. So if somebody sees something and you don't catch their attention some way really fast, they're going to move on to the next. The second point they made was that good content is ignored if there's not great delivery. I have known that from the work that both of them have done with me, Ala on my show and Haven on my content. And we want to say something right up front, show something right up front that grabs attention, because if we don't grab attention, it doesn't matter what comes after that. One of the things that I have talked with them about, and I believe this is a mistake a lot of people make with social media, is it's not necessarily who knows you. I'm sorry, it's not necessarily who you know, it's who knows you. And somebody gave a real good example of what happens. So if you know people, you can build a great pipeline with that, and that's not a bad thing. But if people know you, that creates conversations which can lead to sales. And putting content out there is putting yourself out there so people can see you, see who you really are, see how authentic you are, and then they'll give you a chance. They'll choose you before that person that's an influencer. And the key point I got from Haven and Ala, and I'm going to read this because I think it's really good and I don't want to screw it up. You're not competing on expertise, you're competing for attention. Now, if you don't have the expertise, you might screw it up after that. But if you don't get their attention, you're never going to be able to share your expertise with them. So I want to wrap up just for a couple of minutes with some ideas that I came up with, or some thoughts that I had from the conversations. Every person that I talked to on the last 4 shows talked about consistency. It doesn't matter how good your content is. It doesn't matter how good your ideas are. It's not about how pretty you are in a picture, if there's just one of them, because people aren't going to remember one. But you've got to be consistent. The second thing, and I just mentioned this, is who knows you is way more important than who you know. Now, who you know is important. Again, we talked about that can build pipelines. It goes back to consistency. You've got to be consistent with the people in your pipeline. But who knows you can lead to sales conversations right away. Going back to my story about the lawyer that I was referred to, he didn't have to do anything else because I called him and said, people said you were the man I needed to talk to. Another thing that came up over and over, business people aren't interested in being an influencer. And in fact, in the business world, being an influencer is maybe not a good thing. But what they need to understand is they need to be influential. What you want to be is the person that if you're doing a podcast, people in your industry want to listen to it. If you're going to show up in a town and you're going to make a talk at a meeting, people in your industry want to come to that meeting. It's about being visible. It's not about being influential. And I'll leave you with this, and I believe it's the most important thing. Quality of your content is important, but if people aren't seeing you and they aren't seeing your content, it doesn't matter how good it is. So remember that it's about consistency, and it needs to be consistency with quality content. I really appreciate y'all being on this call today. I know it was a little, or the show today, I'm sorry. It was a little different. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message on LinkedIn. You can send me an email, or you can even give me a phone call. Check out my calendar and book a meeting. If I can help you, I will. If I can't help you, I'll promise you this. I probably know somebody who can, and I'll send you there. Last thing to remember, Bridging Generations in Sales and Outreach is here on LinkedIn. You can find us on YouTube, and you can find us on Instagram. I appreciate you being here today. And just remember this one thing.